doesn't belong to you. Taking, all right. All right. Taking what doesn't belong to you. Anybody else?
Cheating.
Cheating, okay.
Well, I know at work they tell us that you're stealing their time if you're surfing the internet or taking the paper clips for your own use, stuff like that.
Okay. Taking time.
It's a sin to steal.
Okay.
Put that big eye in there.
Anybody else?
Borrowing and not taking it back.
All right. Borrowing permanently. All right.
Loss of integrity.
What's the word in New Zealand?
Loss of integrity. Yes.
Sometimes it's a necessity.
Ooh. Okay.
Expound.
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay, no. Sorry, you want to throw something at me?
Anybody else?
Emotions.
Emotions. Okay. Emotions. Anybody else? What do you think of when you think of steal or stealing?
Baseball.
Stolen baseball.
Baseball.
That goes right up there with vengeance.
Baseball. All right.
Robbing.
I agree with it.
Robbing. Okay. Anybody else?
Lying.
Lying. Okay.
You do all these things.
That's number 9, I think.
It's hurtful too.
Hurtful.
When our trailer was stolen, I felt violated
Okay.
and kind of angry.
Yeah. I had that happen to me too.
Okay. Make sure that.
It reconnected.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So is it interesting to y'all that this doesn't mention what? It says you will not steal. Doesn't say what. It doesn't give us a specific of what it is you're stealing. I mean, for me at least, most of the time when I think of stealing, we've got a really good array of stuff here. But typically when I think of you will not steal, I'm thinking of stuff, right? That I have crept into this, not that I have thought through this, but just, as an example, I have crept into the backyard of somebody who's got a particular tool I really like, or they've got something else that I really like, and I pick it up and I take it over to my house and it then becomes mine. So stuff, at least for me, is where my mind is the first thing that I go to. Does it, any of y'all, does that match any of y'all's thinking at all? Do you think of stuff first? Can I get a nod, maybe at least? Okay. But I think it's very interesting that we're not given a stuff thing. We're given a you will not steal, period. And I think it's really interesting. So, because the story of this commandment, if you think about it, it really begins kind of early in the Old Testament, in Genesis 40, for those of you that just really would like the reference to this. In Genesis 40, Joseph says from his jail cell in Egypt, I was stolen out of the land of the Hebrews. Have you ever thought of that story, the story of Joseph, as an example of stealing? Because that story is revealing for the way in which it depicts the effects of stealing a person.
Kidnapping, right?
What we would commonly call kidnapping, yes. The loss of home and family, enslavement in Egypt, subjection to imprisonment through false accusations of his master's wife. And what's particularly noticeable in that story and in the laws that have to do with stealing persons is that stealing a person's freedom is virtually always a matter of economics. The theft of a person for economic gain. Turning the stolen object or person into a human machine of productivity. So, if you look a few chapters earlier, Judah, who is Joseph's brother, he comments to his brothers, what profit is there if we kill him? What profit is there if we kill him? Come, let's sell him. Now, I will grant you that perhaps Judah's had an ulterior motive in just trying to convince his brothers not to kill him. But the thing that convinced them was that we can profit. I'm curious, do you think that in the society we live in, that profit might be even a greater motivation in our culture than it was back then?
Absolutely.
Do you think that the fact that profit, we live in an economically driven culture, in a profit-driven culture, do you think that because that is the case, that this particular word to us might have an even greater expanding meaning for us because of the culture we live in?
I think people are the same,
Okay?
just more advertised now.
Okay?
People are not just, it's me, what I can have, what I can get. Greed, that's it.
Yep. So, think about this. What if we talked about, let's see here. Okay, these aren't good, I just need some room. Have you ever thought about stealing, thinking about taking what doesn't belong to you? But what if I turn this a little bit? I want to see if I can get your mind kind of shifted into a different direction or different understanding. What if I said to restrict someone's freedom does that take us in other directions?
Yeah.
Could I throw out to you that is a very valid definition of the word steal? Is to do something that will restrict someone else's freedom to live. This now becomes a bigger issue. It now becomes something that is not just about me and what I do. That one was you, right?
It was.
It is actually about what I, as a human being, living within the community, within the city, within the state, within the country that I live in, and the decisions we make as a group. So, perhaps even thinking about the ways in which we might be coercing or forcing economic production from other people as a way of thinking about stealing. I'll just tell you, one of the things that I see in culture today, because I enjoy sports. I'm a big NBA basketball professional league fan, and I find it interesting that the NBA has had things where they talk about making sure that we're paying people in a fair fashion, and yet pretty much all of the shoes that are being sold with people's name attached to them are being made overseas in places where people are not being paid very much at all.
Slave labor. Human slavery.
Yeah.
I think the government programs, a lot of them you see right now, according to the news that comes out about them, there's so many thefts going on with that. And what happens is that people are getting benefits that they should not be getting, and then there are others that are not getting benefits at all that should be getting them. And there again, there's that situation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to give you some stories other than the one I mentioned with Joseph, because that's a pretty big one. That's a pretty big one. Now, what's interesting in that story, that it kind of had a happy ending in some ways. How many of you are familiar with the piece of scripture where Joseph is speaking to his brothers who are now aware that it's Joseph? See, beforehand, Joseph had played this little game with them, and this whole thing with go back and get Benjamin and bring him, the other brother of Rachel. I mean, the other son of Rachel, the one that was Joseph's real brother. And then the whole thing with putting the cup, the silver, probably a silver or gold cup in the grain, and just playing this whole game with them to make them more nervous and more apprehensive. And then finally, Joseph, I'm not sure if he was wearing a wig, but in my head I see him wearing a wig, and he pulls the wig off, and it's like, it's me. And he tells them, don't feel awful, because what you intended for evil, God intended for good. Now, if I haven't told you yet, that word intended, those two intendeds are not the same word, and they really should not be translated as the same word, because it makes it sound as though God wanted Joseph to have been treated so horribly. God wanted Joseph to be in prison. God wanted Joseph to be accused wrongly. No. God does not desire evil things to happen. The words there are different, and they really should be translated differently. When it says what you intended for evil, the word there literally means what you wove together for evil. God re-wove together for good. Does that make sense? Okay. So that had kind of a happy ending. But then we have some other stories. So going back a little bit before Jacob, or before Joseph, we have his father, Jacob. Jacob, if you guys don't know the story, Jacob had interaction with his uncle Laban because Jacob wanted to marry Laban's daughter, Rachel. He loved Rachel. In fact, he loved Rachel enough, he was willing to work hard labor for 7 years for this wife. And so he did. And then Laban, to take advantage, to steal his life, 7 years of his life, to steal his economic production. He sneaks the sister in to the wedding bed, and in the morning, Jacob realizes, wait a minute, something's not right here. What have you done, uncle? And Laban's like, well, you know, she was supposed to go first. She's the oldest. Oh, did we not talk about this? And he says, but if you want Rachel, you'll have to work 7 more years. And then the story just keeps going with stealing back and forth and over and again. So once he works again and he gets Rachel finally, then when they leave, they steal from Laban as they take off. Not only money, well actually Jacob, he basically does some genetics breeding to make sure that the largest amount of their livestock is not perfect, is bespeckled and striped and whatnot. And he had already made this deal that he would take all the imperfect animals and his uncle would take the perfect animals. Laban thought he was getting the better end of the deal, but because of Jacob's shenanigans, he ended up taking most of the wealth away from his uncle. And then when they went out of town, he and the 2 daughters who were not happy with their uncle, with their father, they stole Laban's idols, stole his gods. And again, we're talking about taking away from someone else their freedom to live. So we have that story. We have the story of Jacob. And Jacob's no stranger to doing this. Do you remember what he did to his brother? He catches his brother at a weak moment where he says, I'm dying. I am starving. And he has made this soup, the stew. And what's interesting is the description of this stew is the red stuff. That's really what it means. Jacob had cooked up some red stuff. Now, red stuff, red is what gives life. That's why we talk about blood in a way that is a metaphor for life. It's the red stuff. It's the life. So Jacob was saying, Jacob had cooked up stuff that could give him life. And Esau makes a horrible deal for food. He trades his birthright for beans, basically. Trades his birthright for beans. Birthright was that he would get the double portion of the inheritance at the end, and he would be the person in charge of the family. So he trades that away, and then, that's not enough, Jacob puts on a goat suit and goes into his nearly blind father and steals his brother's blessing of the firstborn. And it's not just Jacob, it's Jacob's mother that also goes in along with the plan and helps him plan it. And so again, taking away from someone else because I simply want that. I'm willing to take away their freedom to live the way they should be able to live. Tony Campolo said, we must learn to live simply so that others can simply live. Amen and ouch. Especially in this culture.
Terry.
Yes, ma'am. I love it when you huff.
I don't want to open a can of worms.
Oh, yes, you do. Come on.
But, you know, my mind keeps going to Christmas and how they're trying to take Christ out of Christmas.
Okay.
We're not supposed to say Merry Christmas, it's Happy Holidays.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because it has become so commercialized.
Sure.
And it's a money-making time.
It is.
For all businesses.
It is.
For some people, it's a money-draining time.
It absolutely can be. So, let's just take that for an instance. Let's take that for a moment and stop there. So let me speak to a couple of things there you said. Number one, the whole thing about taking Christ out of Christmas. Several things that come to mind that I've heard people talk about in that. One, it's about businesses no longer saying Merry Christmas. Okay? Nobody is stopping you from saying Merry Christmas to others. And I have yet to find anybody, regardless of whether they are of a different religion or no religion than me, I have yet to find anybody that takes offense when I tell them Merry Christmas. That just doesn't happen. Now, the businesses, you know, I think it's quite, this is my personal opinion, I think it is quite fine for business to say, you know what, we're going to include everybody. Right. We have customers come in that are Jewish, and they're celebrating Hanukkah. We have customers come in who are Muslim, and they are celebrating, I think it's Ramadan at that point. We have other people who come in, and maybe they're celebrating some other holiday. Kwanzaa, yes, Kwanzaa another one. And because we want everyone to feel welcome, we're simply going to say, Happy Holidays. Now, my personal opinion is I don't feel like that should offend me at all. If somebody that was celebrating something else came up to me and said, Happy Kwanzaa, I'd be like, yes, Happy Kwanzaa to you. Or if somebody said, Happy Hanukkah. I have Jewish friends. Happy Hanukkah. I would be like, Happy Hanukkah. Number one, because I know what that celebration's about. And it's a great celebration. I've never been to that's one thing I would love to do is actually go to a Hanukkah celebration. I've never spun a little dreidel. They have like a little thing they spin. I've always wanted to spin one of those. see what's like. But it's like, it's like anything else. We believe what we believe, but we understand that others may not. And so to say to them, listen, if you're celebrating something that is celebrating love, it's celebrating family, it's celebrating togetherness, why not say, yes, go you. Great for you. And for businesses to want to include everybody, I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. For those of you that have seen the thing where it is Happy Xmas,
I don't like that.
I realize, but the reason that most people don't like it is because they don't realize that that actually is a more accurate way, if we're going to go with original language, of writing Merry Christmas. X is actually the first letter of the Greek word that stands for Christ. And so that was a way of actually writing Merry Christmas, but in a shorter way. I remember when I was in 3rd grade, I remember this, I will remember it the rest of my life. We had a substitute teacher, her name was Mrs. Ayers. I can't believe I still remember that. Mrs. Ayers came in, and oh my goodness, she went on this diatribe about some kid had given her a card. This was a Christian school. Merry Xmas. I wish I had known at that point what I know now. Actually, maybe I don't, because I probably would have gotten in trouble if I had said something. Yeah, probably not a good idea. Realize that that is actually a very correct way of saying it. It is not people necessarily trying to take Christ out of Christmas. And maybe if we can try to think the best of people, maybe that they know that. I don't know. But that's, again, my personal opinion. I do realize why we don't, because perhaps some people, that is why they do it. But I try to assume the best on that.
Oh, we shouldn't say Xmas, though. Just say
Xmas, no, because it's really Christmas. That's what the X stands for. The X stands for Christ. All right. But let's go to the economic part of it. What if, as part of our celebration of Christmas, we actually thought about how do we, if we go to the positive side of this, right? Not the negative side of you will not steal, but the positive side. If we were going to state this in a positive way, you know how Jesus kind of changes things into a more substantial thing. He says, okay, you aren't to commit adultery, but I say to you, it's actually a bigger thing. It's more about a heart thing, right? It's actually, if you are looking at a woman and with lust in your heart, that's really what we're talking about. Not just the outside actions, but the inside thing. So if we were going to take this and we were going to make it more of an internal thing and make it a positive statement instead of a negative statement, what do you think that might look like?
You should care for the economic circumstances of your neighbors.
Yes, that's too long for me to write, but yes, yes. What if instead of saying you will not steal, you said you will live in such a way that takes into consideration the other humans that live around you, that they need to have a life as well? Is it stealing? When Jesus says it's harder, and I can't even believe I didn't put this down, it just popped in my head. When Jesus said, the rich young ruler comes to Jesus. This is a New Testament example. There are tons of Old Testament examples. I have a bunch down. I'm not going to read through them because we're going to run out of time eventually. But in the New Testament, the rich young ruler comes to Jesus. And he says, Master, what must I do to inherit the kingdom? Now, guys, when he says, what must I do to inherit the kingdom, he is not asking Jesus, how do I make sure I go to heaven when I die? That is not what he is asking. He is asking, right now, in this moment, how do I inherit, how do I enter into the kingdom of God now? How do I enter into living as though the kingdom is breaking in right now? How do I live? How do I do that? And Jesus says, well, you know the commandments. And his response is, I do. And I have kept all of them. And Jesus is like, oh, okay. Good for you. But I sense that this particular one is something that you're not actually taking as seriously as you should. So he has not stolen physically. He's not going to, some person and stealing stuff and selling it. He's not going and taking their sheep. But Jesus says, one thing you lack, sell your stuff and give it to those whose lives have been stolen from them. I'll use a different word there. Jesus used the poor. I looked this up. It would take about $6 billion a year, and that's a very low estimate. It's a conservative estimate. But at $6 to $7 billion a year, if countries would just be willing to put that money forth, and we could end world hunger. That is 1% of what countries spend on military stuff per year. 1%. I'm just going to let that sit for a minute. We could stop world hunger if we would just not spend 1% of what we spend on military. Can I just say that seems incredibly out of whack? That countries having a strong military, just 1% less, and we could end people not having any food. Every day. When Jesus speaks of the rich, who do you think of? Typically, in our country, who do you think people think of when we think of the rich?
Someone who has more money than you do.
Somebody who has more. But I got athletes. Athletes is one. Yes, that's a good one. Governments. Okay. Yeah.
Movie stars.
Movie stars. Anybody else?
Politicians. That's government.
Politicians. Yes.
That's government.
Unfortunately, politicians. Whoever thought that paying politicians their salaries for the rest of their lives, even after they're in government, was crazy. Personal opinion there. I'll tell you the person, when I say rich people, I'll tell you one person that I almost universally hear someone say, Bill Gates. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the rich. Bill Gates.
Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett, yes. Warren Buffett. Isn't it interesting that when we think of the rich in this country, typically we do exactly what Mike said. We think of someone who makes more money than we do. We don't see ourselves as rich. Would you guys be shocked if I told you that the rest of the world, that 80% of the rest of the world exists on less than $2 a day?
80%.
80% of the rest of the world exists on less than $2 a day.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and the rest of the world, that when they think of the rich, the first First group they think of is Americans,
Yep.
or maybe Western Europeans.
Guys, if we're really going to be honest with ourselves, we will compare ourselves not to those who are super, super, super rich. We will compare ourselves to the rest of the world and realize it's us. We are the rich. That is uncomfortable. I will readily admit for me, it's uncomfortable. I don't like putting myself in that story of the rich young ruler and me having to be the rich young ruler. I don't like that. That is not a comfortable place to put yourself. You know, that's what happens when we read Bible stories. Typically, when we read a story, we find a person in the story and we kind of identify with someone in the story. When you read the story of the prodigal son, typically you place yourself in one of two positions. You either put yourself in the prodigal. Earlier in life, that's typically where people put themselves. Or maybe a little later in life, they will put themselves in the position of the elder brother. But they find themselves a position in the story. That's one of the amazing things about parables specifically, but about Bible stories in general, is that there's pretty much always a place for you to stand in the story. And in that story, for me to have to put myself and say, okay, Jesus is talking directly to me in that story. I don't like that. I don't know about y'all, but I don't like that. Ugh. I don't want Jesus saying stuff like that to me. I don't want Jesus saying, dude, you're doing awesome. You're doing amazing, Terry. You keep it up. But to hear Jesus saying, are you really not stealing? If we really take it to the degree to which you should be, Terry, are you not just refraining from physically reaching over and grabbing something that belongs to someone else and pulling it into your flock? Are you actually going, I'm going to live my life with my eyes wide open to the circumstances of other people and live in a way that is generous? Because regardless of how you have come about what you have, isn't it mine? Or do you see it as yours? Regardless of how you come about with what you have, is it something that you think is how you're going to maintain life? And so you are going to hold on to that as though you were Ebenezer Scrooge? Boy, there's another story. Or are you realizing that what you have is supposed to, because it's part of your life, that what you have is meant to be used as a blessing for others? That you don't hold on to the stuff. You hold it loosely. And that maybe that changes the way you think about how you live your life. Actually, not. There's no maybe to it. It does. When Christmas comes around, my wife, she helped me. She always makes me a better person. But we were being kind of crazy with Christmas. And we finally came to a point where we said, you know what? This isn't what Christmas is really about. We're only going to do 4 presents. And Laura, what are the 4 presents?
Something you want, something you need, something to wear, and something to read.
And that's it for us. That's one way, and it's not the end-all be-all of trying to live in a way that is cognizant about the rest of the world or the rest of our community. It's just a way of trying to make something more simple. I'll give you another example, and again, I realize I'm probably preaching to the choir here, guys. But do you know that you talk to most people who wait staff? Do you know they hate Sundays?
Yeah.
Sunday afternoons? Do you know why?
The terrible superstition.
And how is that possible? How is it possible that people whose blood runs with the love of Jesus, that they can go to an establishment and they can see people who are working very hard, and when it comes to the end of their meal and they look at either what's left on the table or they look at that little slip that they get, and it's not even 10%. And sometimes, oh my goodness, I have seen the person writes a little note
Bless you.
and says something to the effect of, well, you didn't do such a great job, but I'm at least willing to give you this. You really need to come to know Jesus. Or maybe even worse than that, they print out these little copies of a $20 bill that's not really a $20 bill. It just looks like it when you fold it in half, and then when they pick it up and they open it up, it's some sort of tract that says, well, let me give you something that's worth more than this $20. Get your life straight. How do you think that goes? This person isn't even generous enough to actually give me a tip. They're going to tell me that I need to get my life straight. They don't know me. They don't know my life. They don't know anything. And instead of trying to help me and give me what normal people would give me, they're going to do this. Let me see. Do I want to be a part of that religion?
I have a daughter-in-law that is a Christian, but she was a waitress, and
Yeah.
she will not set foot in a church to this day because of that, the tipping. That's her only reason. We're hypocrites, she says.
So, and it's, guys, this is all over the Old Testament, all over the New Testament. You can go into the Psalms, you can go into Amos, you can go into Nehemiah, you can go into the Proverbs. It talks about how we treat other people economically, how we treat other people with what we have. Because do you realize what happens when you go to some place that you sit down and eat? And there is an understanding between you and this other person that they're going to provide a service for you. Now, you may feel like this is fair or not, but it's the way it is in our country, right? I think they took the whole tipping thing and they put it out of whack, but it's the way it is. I have to get past that and realize this is the way reality is right now. So there is a little covenant between me and my server that says, I'm going to come in, I'm wanting to eat, I'm looking for someone that's going to come in and serve me for this amount of time, the food, and look out for me. And in exchange, I am also going to look out for you. just not with food. But why is that not a part of me serving them? Because that's really what we're called to do. We're called to turn and love others, to serve others, regardless of where we are or what we're doing. And I mean, it depends on what restaurant you're at, but most waiters and waitresses don't make a lot of money. And I think that's one of the ways that we can open our eyes. And I'm just throwing out some ideas here, guys. I'm trying to be practical. But if we could just stop and step back and realize, okay, in this situation, am I stealing their livelihood? Am I stealing their freedom to live their lives because I'm unwilling to live a generous existence? Because that is doing this. Yes?
I'll give another example. It also applies to the actions of your government. So, for example, in the case of Colombia, Colombia was a country that's had hard times periodically. One of the few exports they have is cut flowers. And at one point, their cut flowers were undercutting flower production in the United States. So the result was the U.S. government put quotas on how many flowers could be sent from Colombia to the United States, which decimated Colombian growers. Another example is Haiti. Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. When Haiti was the first country in the Western Hemisphere to eliminate slavery, as a result of that, the U.S. didn't even recognize Haiti as an independent country until basically the rest of the world had. One of the few things Haiti produces is sugar. But in the United States, because there are like 4 families that control sugar production in the U.S., and because of the high fructose corn syrup lobby, we have quotas on sugar. Haiti doesn't have the money to have lobbyists in Washington to get a good quota, so their quota is infinitesimal. Whereas the Dominican Republic, which is on the other side of the same island, has more money, they have more lobbyists, they have a higher quota. The final example I'll give you is in Africa. We send a lot of U.S. grain products to Africa, and we have for decades. One of the effects of that, it does help people with who are facing famine, that kind of thing. But one of the effects, because we send it everywhere, is it eliminates the ability of African farmers to make money producing the same products. And so they can't produce the same products, and it puts them out of business. And so, and that goes on all the time. And unfortunately, there are very few politicians who would think about the impacts that our laws have on poor people around the planet.
And so I would say, I think one of the things that you're saying there, to shine a little bit more light on that, is the idea that as members of the Kingdom Party, and it should be a party, we do not think in ways of only being generous to people who happen to live in our country. Because God's kingdom is not an America First party. It is a love your neighbor regardless of where they live, regardless of where they were born, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their religion. Love your neighbor. And for us, a part of that, I believe, is a positive spin on this word. Live generously to everybody. And I'm going to let you out early today. I am proud of myself. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for who you are. Thank you for your generosity to us. Father, help us to turn, and just as We forgive others because you have forgiven us. We love others because you love us. And we just can't help it. It just flows out of us. Father, help generosity to be the same thing. That our eyes are open to those around us who are in situations where they just feel like they can't seem to find life. That life seems to always be a struggle. They seem to always be underwater. Father, help us to live in ways that do not contribute to that, but in fact are the antidote to that. And we will praise you for the well that we are able to go back to over and over again. And the possibility that that well can be springing up out of us wherever we are. And again, we ask these things understanding who you are because of Jesus. Amen. Pause, everybody, please, please, please. Okay, I need a few people here. Let's see. Karen, would you? I'm in charge of communion today. That was my thing. Would you two be willing to help serve communion today? All right. Would you two be willing to help serve communion today?
Sure.
Yes?
Yeah.
Excellent. And then y'all are doing other stuff. All right. Let's see. Do I have anybody else that would be willing to help with communion? Boy, hand shot up really
Well,
fast there. Okay.
Philip's here. He could, if someone will go with Darlene, Philip can
Okay,
help
Phil
me.
can help you. Okay. Let me see here.
I'm just saying that would help him too.
I'm sorry. Would you help with Darlene? Okay. So I got 3 groups of 2. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes? Yes. Excellent. Thank you.
Tell them where to stand.
I will call you up and I will direct you where to stand. That always seems to be a continuing issue with communion, is people not quite getting where they need to be, and that kind of throws everything.
And the other thing with communion too is tell who you want to take back to the booth and who you want to take up to the